Hi, guys. I'm so glad you're here. Before we get started, I present a disclaimer. This channel isn't a polished audiobook production, and I'm not a professional narrator. It's simply a place to read, reflect, and think out loud. So whether you're listening while working, cleaning house, cooking, or winding down, just know I appreciate you spending some of your time here with me. Today we're starting a new book, Chaos by Tom O'Neill. By popular demand. If you ever wondered whether the official story behind the Manson murders tells the whole story, this book asks and answers some difficult questions. As always, no, I already, yes, if you find value here, like, subscribe, join the community. We're here to have fun. So, let's just dive in, I guess. So, who's here? Say hi to me. I love a fresh book. Oh, I had this holding a page, the epilogue. That's where we're starting. I made a short where I was trying to get the tie broken by comparing The Devil's Chessboard and Chaos. This book, well, we'll go over it together if you're if you're interested. When I started reading this, it was right before the JFK dump. You're gonna hear the evidence of a man in this house. And so I was torn between the two, and it still kind of colors my my hindsight thought process when it comes to this book and what I remember of it. Dude, what if you just used an Allen wrench like the rest of us? Maybe I speak for myself. Hi, Miss Mary. And then Charlie was killed while I was back here, and I was like, this book. Oh, God. Hey, Justin. Justin, stop singing.
Huh?
Stop singing.
Sorry.
I'm live streaming. Oh, what's up, Craig? Good to see y'all. I'm very excited. So I love the way new books smell. Check that spine. We're gonna crinkle it as we go. What? Leave me alone. Anyway, I got my bike today. Oh, I was looking for my phone so I could show you. All right. Do I just jump in? Oh, sweet Miss Lobster, hello. Pew. High fives. I like that. Does it prompt you? Is that, or are you just being sweet to me? Don't be shy. That's funny. M60 Gunner. I made like a chickpea, black bean, lentil bean salad today. That was pretty good. I saw somebody did similar things with ingredients, and he called it his ADHD meal. So where you could just walk by, take a couple spoonfuls. The whole bowl was like 70 grams of protein. The beginning was pretty slow from what you remember. That's why I spaced. Skip ahead to the CIA. No, I'm going to read the whole thing. And I feel like I was rushing it when I first read it as well, because I'm like, I want to get into the nitty gritty. My first ever chapter book that I read was Helter Skelter by Vincent Bugliosi. And so that was intense for me as a kiddo, but my dad was a defense attorney, criminal defense attorney, and I was always fascinated by true crime. Oh, that's so nice. Sweet lady, thank you very much. Thank you for your loving support always, Miss Lobster. All right, so let's take it slow. Let's absorb this together and think about what we're reading together. And Vincent Bugliosi was on another tirade. That was probably my favorite part of this book, is how he confronts this man. Nothing could be worse than accusing a prosecutor of doing what you're implying that I did in this case, he barked at me. It's extremely, extremely defamatory. It was a sunny day in February of 2006, and we were in the kitchen of his Pasadena home. The place was cozy with floral patterns, overstuffed furniture, and literally a white picket fence out front, all belaying the hostility, erupting within its walls. Bugliosi wanted to sue me. It would be, he soon warned, a $100 million libel lawsuit, and one of the biggest lawsuits ever in the true crime genre. If I refused to soft pedal my reporting on him, I'd be powerless to stop it. Yeah. Same with Ed Gein, and now he was from Wisconsin. It's like, what's happening in Wisconsin? They were both. Anyway, so, and who was the old man that shoved needles in his crotch? That wasn't Ed Gein. Who was that? He wrote a letter to the mom of the little girl he murdered, and it was so morbid because he also practiced cannibalism in that instance. I am afraid of talking about it too much because I don't want YouTube to yank this before. Yes, thank you. Like it. Like it. Let's keep going. So, I think we should view ourselves as adversaries. He'd tell me later. Vince, I was on a first name basis with him, as I guess adversaries must be, was a master orator. And this is one of his trademark perorations. Our interview that day dragged on for more than 6 hours, and he did most of the talking, holding forth as expertly as he had when he prosecuted the Charles Manson trial more than 35 years before. 71 and in a shirt sleeves, and no, 71 and in shirt sleeves, Vince still cut an imposing figure, hectoring me over a formica table strewn with legal papers. Hectoring me. Notes, tape recorders, pens, and a stack of books, all written by him. Wiry and spry, his eyes a steely blue, he would sit down only to leap up again and point his finger in my face. Rifling through the pages of one of his yellow legal pads, he read from some remarks he had prepared. I'm a decent guy, Tom, and I'm going to educate you a little on just how decent Vince Bugliosi is. And so he did, reciting a pre-written opening statement that lasted for 45 minutes. He insisted on beginning this way. He'd dragooned, Gragooned, his wife, Gail, into serving as a witness for the proceedings, just in case I'd try to misrepresent him. Essentially, he turned his kitchen into a courtroom, and in a courtroom, he was in his element. Bugliosi made his name in the Manson trial, captivating the nation with stories of murderous hippies, brainwashing, race wars, and acid trips gone awry. Vince was sure to remind me, early and often, that he'd written 3 best-selling books, including Helter Skelter, his account of the Manson murders and their aftermath, which became the most popular true crime book ever. If he seemed a little keyed up that day, well, so was I. My task was to press him on some of his conduct in the Manson trial. There were big holes in Helter Skelter, contradictions, omissions, discrepancies with police reports. The book amounts to an official narrative that few have ever thought to question, but I found troves of documents, many of them unexamined for decades and never before reported on, that entangle Vince and a host of other major players like Manson's parole officer, his friends in Hollywood, the cops and lawyers and researchers and medical professionals surrounding him. Among many other things, I had evidence in Vince's own handwriting that one of his lead witnesses had lied under oath. I sometimes wonder if Vince could see what a bundle of nerves I was that day. I'm not a church-going person, but I'd gone to church that morning and said a little prayer. My mom always told me I should pray when I need help, and that day I needed all the help I could get. I hoped that my interview with Vince would mark a turning point in my 7 years of intensive reporting on the Manson murders. And this is something that journalists do, long-term investigations, and they're talking about Candace fixating on Charlie Kirk for 10 months. It'd have been nice if they, Albert Fish, that's right. Hello, mustard and biscuits. Yes. All right, where was I? Albert Fish, that guy was he was a whole thing. Where was I? He's a decent guy. Manson. Sorry, guys. Pray when I need help. I hoped that my interview with Vince would mark a turning point in my 7 years of intensive reporting on the Manson murders. I'd interviewed more than 1,000 people by then. My work had left me at various points broke, depressed, and terrified that I was becoming one of those people, an obsessive, a conspiracy theorist, a lunatic. I'd let friendships fall away, my family worried about my sanity. Manson himself had harangued me from prison. I'd face multiple threats on my life. I don't consider myself credulous, but I discovered things I thought impossible about the Manson murders and California in the 60s. Things that reek of duplicity and cover-up, implicating police departments up and down the state, plus the courts, plus, though I have to take a deep breath before I let myself say it, the CIA. If I could get Bugliosi to admit any wrongdoing, or even to let a stray detail slip, I could finally start to unveil dozens of other strands of my reporting. Maybe soon I could get my life back, whatever that might look like. At the very least, I could know that I had done all I could to get to the bottom of this seemingly endless hole. Sitting in his kitchen, though, and watching the hours wear on as Vince defended and fortified every point he made, my heart sank. He was stonewalling me. I could hardly get a word in edgewise. It's a tribute to your research, he told me. You found something that I did not find. In the closest thing I got to a concession, he said, some things may have gotten past me. But he added, I would never in a trillion years do what you're suggesting, okay? Never. My whole history would be opposite to that, or opposed to that. And number two, Tom, even if I had the thought you're suggesting of suborning perjury, it goes nowhere. It's preposterous. It's silly. Who cares? It means nothing. Thank you, Zeus. Ooh. Thank you, Craig. Hello, Abby. Oh, I love it. Thank you for letting me know you're here, sweet lady. He said, who cares? It means nothing. Who cares? I've asked myself that a lot over the years. Was it worth investing so much of my time and energy in these, some of the most well-known, worn-out crimes in American history? How did I end up falling into this anyway? I remember glancing over at Gail, Vince's wife, during his long stentorian opening statement. Stentorian. I want to know what that means, so I'm going to look that up quick. Stentorian. Let's add a tab. I lost all my tabs too. I hate when that happens. Stentorian. Definition. The word stentorian is an adjective that means extremely loud, booming, and powerful. Stentorian. Opening statement. She was leaning against the counter looking exhausted, her eyelids drooping. Eventually, she excused herself to go upstairs and lie down. She must have heard it all 1,000 times before. His scripted lines, his self-aggrandizement. When I'm down on myself, I imagine everyone feels like Gail did that day. Oh no, not the Manson murders again. We've been through this. We've processed this. We know everything there is to know. Don't drag us back into this story. I was almost heartened then to see that Vince was so anxious. That's what kept me going, knowing that I'd gotten under his skin. Why would he be so committed to stopping this? And if what I'd discovered was really nothing, why had so many of his former colleagues told me otherwise? Another one of my sources had tipped off Vince about my reporting, giving him the ludicrous idea that I believed he framed Manson. That was dead wrong. I've never been a Manson apologist. I think he was every bit as evil as the media made him out to be. But it is true that Stephen K., Vince's prosecutor on the case, and no friend of his, had been shocked by the notes I'd found in Vince's handwriting, telling me they could be enough to overturn all the verdicts against Manson and the family. That was never my goal, though. I just wanted to find out what really happened. I don't know what to believe now, Kay told me. If he, Vince, changed this, what else did he change? I wanted to know the same thing, but Vince always found a way to change the subject. Where does it go? He kept asking. What's the point? The point, as I saw it, was an act of perjury called the whole motive for the murders into question. Vince was too busy patronizing me about my motives to take that into consideration. How could I dare insinuate that he'd done something wrong? How could I live with myself if I tarnished his sterling reputation? He liked to bring up the man in the mirror as if he, and not Michael Jackson, had popularized the phrase. You cannot get away, Vince said. You cannot get away from him. Oof, how corny. I tried to steer the conversation back to Manson, but Vince was having none of it. He wanted to recite some testimonials about his good character, to read them into the record. Both of us had showed up that day with 2 tape recorders. I was as scrupulous as he was, and neither of us wanted to risk having an incomplete account of the conversation. Over and over, whenever the intensity mounted and Vince had something sensitive to say, he would demand that we go off the record, meaning each of us had to shut off 2 machines, sometimes just for a few seconds, only to turn them all back on again. He'd often forget one of his, and I'd have to say, Vince, you didn't turn it off. Off the record, he'd lash into me again, his eyes piercing under that silver crescent of hair. If you do the book and it's legally defamatory, you have to realize one thing, he said. You have to realize I have no choice. I have to sue you. By the time I left his house, I had a headache from all the shouting, and the sun had set behind the Hollywood Hills. Gail had never bothered to come downstairs again. Outside, before I got to my car, Vince grabbed my arm and reminded me that a blurb from him could boost the sales of my book. And he'd be happy to offer one, provided the manuscript passed muster with him. That's not a quid pro quo offer, he added, but it seemed like one to me. Driving away, I felt despondent. I had just gone toe-to-toe with one of the most famous prosecutors and true crime authors in the world. Of course, I hadn't broken him. I knew I wasn't alone either. Other reporters had warned me that Vince could be ferocious. One of them, Mary Nieswender of the Long Beach Press Telegram and Independent, told me that Vince had threatened her back in the 80s when she was preparing an expose on him. He knew where her kids went to school, and it would be very easy to plant narcotics in their lockers. And that was a quote. Actually, I didn't even need other sources. Vince himself had told me mere minutes before that he had no compunction about hurting people to exact justice or get revenge. As it turned out, my reprieve was short-lived. I arrived at my home in Venice Beach to find that he had already left me a message, wanting to talk about a couple follow-up things. I called him back and we talked for another few hours. The next day, we had another phone call, then another. When he saw that I wouldn't back down, Vince only grew more exasperated. If you vaguely imply to your readers that I somehow concealed evidence from the Manson jury, he told me on the phone, whether you believe it or not, the only thing you're going to be accomplishing is jeopardizing your financial future and that of your publisher. Demanding an apology, he assured me that I was treading in dangerous waters. It's possible the next time we see each other, I'll be cross-examining you on the witness stand. Fortunately, that never happened. The next time I saw Vince, it was June of 2011, and he was striding past me in the auditorium at the Santa Monica Library where he was giving a talk. He'd noticed me, his adversary, in the crowd and paused as he made his way forward. "Are you Tom O'Neill?" "Yes. Hi, Vince. Why are you so happy?" I must have been smiling out of nervousness. "I'm happy to see you," I said. Studying me a bit, he asked, "Did you do something to your hair?" "No. It looks different." And he kept walking, and that was it. We never spoke again. Vince died in 2015. Sometimes I wish he were alive to read what follows, even if he'd try to sue me over it. I feel foolish for having expected to get firm answers from him. I replay the scenario in my head, figuring out where I could have caught him in a lie, where I should have pressed him harder, how I might have parried his counterattacks. I really thought that, with enough tenacity, I could get to the truth under all this. Now, most of the people who had the full story, including Manson himself, have died. And the questions I had then have continued to consume me for almost 20 years. But I'm certain of one thing: much of what we accept as fact is fiction. Chapter 1, The Crime of the Century. Thank you. What? A blazing fireplace and read things like Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings. See, I was thinking about doing that. Me and my boys read the Harry Potter series together twice through, just for bedtime stories, and that was what that's when I was mulling over starting a channel like this. It's crazy. It's weird when this kind of stuff hits. Yeah. I wonder, where's Diana? What did she say? Diana, you're here listening. Carl. Diana, incredible time of our lives. I lived in Orange County at the time. This was a very scary time. Never thought this kind of crime was happening around me. Yes, ma'am. And it was so sad. I don't know what movie your name is referencing, Mustard and Biscuits. Do you, Justin? Hey, Justin. You got both earbuds in?
Sorry.
A movie reference, Mustard and Biscuits. No?
I can't remember.
Yeah. Okay. It's all right. Sling Blade. Oh. You guys already talked about it. Is it The Big Lebowski? That was the preface, yes. Now we're at chapter 1. All right, The Crime of the Century, 2 decades overdue. My life took a sharp left-hand turn on March 21st, 1999, the day after my 40th birthday, the day all this started. I was in bed with a hangover, as I'd been after countless birthdays before, and I felt an acute burst of self-loathing. I was a freelance journalist who hadn't worked in 4 months. I'd fallen into journalism almost by accident. For years, I'd driven a horse and carriage on the night shift at Central Park, and over time, my unsolicited submissions to magazines like New York had led to bigger and bigger assignments. All right. I had to adjust my Zen. JFK 2.0, yeah. All right. Well, hey, stop singing. So while I was happy now to be living in Venice Beach and making a living as a writer, I missed New York, and mine was still a precarious existence. My friends had obligations, they'd started families, they'd worked long hours in busy offices, they led full lives. Even though my youth was behind me, I was so untethered that I could sleep into the afternoon. Actually, I couldn't afford to do much else at this point. I felt like a mess. When the phone rang, I had to make a real effort just to pick it up. It was Leslie Van Buskirk. It was Leslie Van Buskirk, my former editor from Us magazine, now at Premiere, with an assignment. The 30th anniversary of the Manson murders was coming up, and she wanted a reported piece about the aftershocks in Hollywood. So many years later, Manson's name still served as a kind of shorthand for a very American form of brutal violence, the kind that erupts seemingly from nowhere and confirms the nation's darkest fears about itself. The crimes still held great sway over the public imagination, my editor said. What was it that made Manson so special? Why had he and the family lingered in the cultural conversation when other, even more macabre murders had faded from memory? Premiere was a film magazine, so my editor wanted me to talk to Hollywood's old guard, the generation that found itself in disturbing proximity to Manson, and to find out how they felt with 3 decades of perspective. It was a loose concept. Leslie trusted me to find a good direction for it and to shape it into something unexpected. I almost said no. I'd never been particularly interested in the Manson murders. I was 10 years old when they happened, growing up in Philadelphia, and though my brother swears up and down he remembers me keeping a scrapbook about the crimes, I can't recall how they affected me in the slightest. If anything, I thought I was one of the few people on the planet who'd never read Helter Skelter, like an overplayed song or an iconic movie. Manson held little interest to me precisely because he was ubiquitous. The murders he ordered were often discussed in the true crime of as the crime of the century. And crimes of the century tend to be pretty well picked over. But I needed the job, and I trusted Leslie's judgment. We'd worked together on a number of stories at Us. It was a monthly magazine then, not a weekly tabloid. And a piece like this, Pitch Black, would be welcome departure from my routine as an entertainment writer, which called for a lot of sit-down meetings with movie stars in their cushy Hollywood Hills homes, where they'd trot out lines about brave career choices and the need for privacy. That's not to say the work was without its twists and turns. I had gotten in a shouting match with Tom Cruise about Scientology. Gary Shandling had somehow found a way to abandon me during an interview in his own home, and I'd pissed off Alec Baldwin, but who hasn't? I had some chops, in other words, but not much in the way of investigative bona fides. For a recent story about an unsolved murder, I'd chased down some great leads, but because my case was mostly circumstantial, the magazine sensibly decided to play it safe, and the piece came out toothless. This time I thought I could do better. In fact, through the fog of my hangover, I remembered thinking, this will be easy. I agreed to file 5,000 words in 3 months. Afterwards, I thought maybe I could move back to New York. 20 years later, the piece isn't finished. The magazine no longer exists, and I'm still in LA. A picture puzzle. Before I interviewed anyone, I read Helter Skelter. I saw what all the fuss was about. It was a forceful, absorbing book with disquieting details I'd never heard before. In their infamy, the murders had always seemed to exist in a vacuum, and yet, reading Bugliosi's account, what had seemed flat and played out was full of intrigue. I made notes and lists of potential interviews, trying to find an angle that hadn't been worked over. Towards the beginning of the book, Bugliosi chides anyone who believes that solving murder is easy. Here is a snippet of that book. In literature, a murder scene is often likened to a picture puzzle. If one is patient and keeps trying, eventually all the pieces will fit into place. Veteran policemen know otherwise. Even after a solution emerges, if one does, there will be leftover pieces, evidence that just doesn't seem to fit. Some pieces will always be missing. He was right, and yet I wondered about the leftover pieces in this case. In Bugliosi's telling, there didn't seem to be too many. His picture puzzle was eerily complete. That sense of certitude contributed to my feeling that the media had exhausted the murders. The thought of them could exhaust me too. Bugliosi describes Manson as a metaphor for evil, a stand-in for the dark and malignant side of humanity. When I summoned Manson in my mind, I saw the evil, the maniacal gleam in his eye, the swastika carved into his forehead. I saw the story we tell ourselves about the end of the 60s, the souring of the hippie dream, the death throes of the counterculture, the lurid Dionysian undercurrents of Los Angeles. I had to sort that through in my head. Anyway, with its confluence of money, sex, and celebrity. Because we all know that story, it's hard to discuss the Manson murders in a way that captures their grim power. The bare facts learned and digested almost by rote feel evacuated of meaning. The voltage that shot through America has been reduced to a mild jolt, a series of concise Wikipedia entries and popular photographs. In the way the historical events do, it all feels somehow remote and settled. But it's critical to let yourself feel that shock, which begins to return as the details accumulate. This isn't just history, it's what Bugliosi called in his opening statement at the trial, a passion for violent death. Despite the common misconception, the murders are still shrouded in mystery, down to some of their most basic details. Yeah. Get after it. Two more? One more.
Is there 1,000 people?
20.
Hello, 20.
Hello, 20 people from Justin.
Sorry, 20.
He's building something. Hi, Divining Rod. I like to drink and smoke all through the Santa Cruz. Oh my goodness. All right. Yes, it's critical to let yourself feel that shock, or was I over here? Let's see. This isn't just history. It's what Bugliosi called a passion for violent death. Despite the common conceptions, the murders are still shrouded in mystery, down to some of their most basic details. There are at least 4 versions of what happened, each with its own account of who stabbed whom with which knives, who said what, who was standing where. Statements have been exaggerated, recanted, or modified. Autopsy reports don't always square with trial testimony. The killers have not always agreed on who did the killing. Obsessives continue to litigate the smallest discrepancies in the crime scenes, the handles of weapons, the location of blood splatter, the coroner's official time of death. Even if you could settle those scores, you're still left with the big question: why did any of this happen at all? Something to shock the world. August 8th, 1969, the front page of the morning's Los Angeles Times described an ordinary day in the city. Central Receiving Hospital had failed to save the life of a wounded policeman. The legislature had passed a new budget for schools, and scientists were optimistic that Mars's south polar cap could be hospitable to alien life. In London, the Beatles had been photographed crossing the street outside their studio, a shot that would become the cover of Abbey Road. Walter Cronkite led the CBS Evening News with a story about the devaluation of the franc. The space race was still in full swing, and Americans were dreaming, sometimes with a touch of trepidation, about the science fiction future. Less than 3 weeks earlier, NASA had put the first man on the moon, an awe-inspiring testament to technological ingenuity. Conversely, the #1 song in the country was Zager and Evans in the year 2525, which imagined a dystopian future where you ain't gonna need to tell the truth, tell no lies, everything you think, do, and say is in the pill you took today. That's so interesting, because I felt that way with Chantix. I took Chantix to quit smoking, and it was like I put a tape in my tape deck, and it had, suicidal ideation playing on a loop like 15 minutes after I took it. That wasn't for me, and I was happy to recognize that immediately. Okay. Oh, it would prove to be a more trenchant observation about the present moment than anyone would have thought. Late that night at the Spawn Movie Ranch, a man and 3 women got in a beat-up yellow 1959 Ford and headed towards Beverly Hills. A ranch hand heard one of the women say, "We're going to get some fucking pigs." The woman was Susan Sadie Atkins, 21, who'd grown up mostly in San Jose. The daughter of 2 alcoholics, she'd been in her church choir and the glee club and said that her brother and his friends would often molest her. She had dropped out of high school and moved to San Francisco, where she'd worked as a topless dancer and gotten into LSD. "My family kept telling me, 'You're going downhill, you're going downhill, you're going downhill,'" she would say later. "So I just went downhill, and I went all the way down to the bottom." Huddled beside her in the back of the car, they'd torn out the seats to accommodate more food from the dumpster dives they'd often went on, was Patricia Katie Krenwinkel, 21, from Inglewood. Krenwinkel had developed a hormone problem as a kid, leading her to overeat and fear that she was ugly and unwanted. As a teen, she got into drugs and started to drink heavily. One day in 1967, she'd left her car in the parking lot, failed to collect the 2 paychecks from her job at an insurance company, and disappeared. In the passenger seat was Linda Kasabian, 20, from New Hampshire. She played basketball in high school, but she dropped out to get married. The union lasted less than 6 months. Not long after, in Boston, she was arrested in a narcotics bust. By the spring of '68, she remarried, had a kid, and moved to Los Angeles. She sometimes introduced herself as Yana the Witch. And at the wheel was Charles Tex Watson, 23 and 6'3", from East Texas. Watson had been a Boy Scout and the captain of the high school football team. He sometimes helped his dad, who ran a gas station and grocery store. At North Texas State University, he joined a fraternity and started getting stoned. Soon he dropped out, moved to California, and got a job as a wig salesman.
Right.
He's behind the TV and he just peeked up at me when I stopped reading. I was just thinking about that movie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I like how Tarantino, I couldn't think of his name, rewrote the situation as if the good guys won or something. At least the pregnant Tate survived, although Margot Robbie's dirty feet in the theater was off-putting, but I knew what it meant. Yeah, much better ending. All right. Okay, at North Texas State University, he joined a fraternity and started getting stoned. He dropped out, moved to California, got a job as a wig salesman. One day, he picked up a hitchhiker who turned out to be Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys, a chance occurrence that changed both their lives forever. That night in the Ford, all 4 were dressed in black from head to toe. None of them had a history of violence. They were part of a hippie commune that called itself the Family, living in isolation at the Spawn Ranch, whose mountainous 500 acres and film set had once provided dramatic backdrop for Western-themed movies and TV shows. The family had assembled a new age bricolage of environmentalism, anti-establishment politics, free love, and apocalyptic Christianity, rounded out with a vehement rejection of conventional morality. More than anything, they lived according to the whims of their leader, the 34-year-old Charles Mills Manson, who had commanded them to take their trip that night. My hair curls into my face, and I feel like when I'm sitting here reading, they just kind of like crawl over and tickle. You can do it. Ooh, you can do it. Lean on it. Okay. The four arrived at 10,050 CeeLo Drive, where the actress, let me start over. Let's take a drink. Let's have a pause. Yes, Candace Bergen. Candace Bergen. Yeah, Murphy Brown was kind of in the middle of this. Yeah, they should probably find out why. I feel like they ought to find out why. I wish I would have known that about her while I was watching Murphy Brown, because I did. We were very limited in the 90s. So, the four arrived at 10,050 CeeLo Drive, where the actress Sharon Tate lived with her husband, the filmmaker Roman Polanski. He was away in London at the time, scouting locations for The Day of the Dolphin, a movie in which a dolphin is trained to assassinate the President of the United States. The drive to CeeLo would have taken about 40 minutes. It was just after midnight when they arrived. Benedict Canyon was quiet, seemingly worlds away from the hustle and sprawl of Los Angeles. The house, built in 1942, had belonged to a French actress who'd modeled it on the Norman country estate of her youth, a long, low rambler at the end of a cul-de-sac. Invisible from the street, it sat on 3 acres of bucolic, isolated land, nestled against a hillside on a bluff. It afforded views of Los Angeles glittering to the east and Bel Air's fulsome estates unfurling to the west. On a clear day, you could see straight to the Pacific, 10 miles out. Watson scaled a pole to sever the phone lines to the house. He'd been here before, and he knew where to find them right away. There was an electric gate leading to the driveway, but instead of activating it, the four elected to jump over an embankment and drop into the main property. All of them were carrying buck knives. Watson also had a .22 buntline revolver. Kasabian remained on the outskirts, keeping watch. The other 3 crept up the hill towards the secluded estate. At the top of the driveway, they found Stephen Parent, an 18-year-old boy who'd been visiting the caretaker in the guest house to sell him a clock radio. He was sitting in his dad's white Rambler, having already rolled his window down to activate the gate control. Watson approached the driver's side and pointed the revolver at his face. "Please don't hurt me, I won't say anything," Parent screamed, raising his arms to protect himself. Watson slashed his left hand with the knife, slicing through the strap of his wristwatch. Then he shot Parent 4 times in his arm, his left cheek, and twice in the chest. Parent died instantly, his blood beginning to pool in the car. Those 4 shots rang out through Benedict Canyon, but no one in the house at 10,050 CeeLo Drive seemed to hear them. It was a rustic home of stone and wood, its clapboard siding often described in the many newspaper stories soon to follow as tomato red. Beside the long front porch, a winding flagstone path led past a wishing well with stone doves and squirrels perched on its lip. There was a pool in the back and a modest guest house. The yard had low hedges, immense pines, and welcoming beds of daisies and marigolds. A white Dutch door opened into the living room, where a stone fireplace, beamed ceilings, and a loft with a redwood ladder provided a warm ambiance. Finding no open windows or doors, Watson cut a long horizontal slit in the window screen outside the dining room and gained entry into the house. He went to the front door to let Atkins and Krenwinkel in. In the living room, there were 3 killers. Nope, the 3 killers came across Wojciech Wojtek Frykowski, a 32-year-old Polish emigre, an aspiring filmmaker, asleep on the couch with an American flag draped over it. EMIGRE, and the beginning and last E have accents on them. Can any of you lovely people spell phonetically how I'm supposed to pronounce that word? Emigre? Is it emigre? and I'm just overthinking it. Anyway, so he was a Polish emigre and an aspiring filmmaker, asleep on the couch with an American flag draped over it. Frykowski was coming off a 10-day mescaline trip at the time, having survived the brutal Second World War in Poland. He'd gone on to lead an aimless life in America, and friends thought there was something brooding and disturbed about him. He was part of a generation of Poles who'd been put on a crooked orbit. Now, rubbing his eyes to make out the figures clad in black and standing over him, Frykowski stretched his arms and, apparently mistaking them for friends, asked, "What time is it?" Watson trained his gun on Frykowski and said, "Be quiet. Don't move or you're dead." Frykowski stiffened, the gravity of the situation beginning to seize him. "Who are you?" he asked, "and what are you doing here?" "I'm the devil, and I'm here to do the devil's business," Watson replied, kicking Frykowski in the head. In a linen closet, Atkins found a towel and used it to bind Frykowski's hands as best she could. Then, on Watson's instructions, she cased the house, looking for others. She came to a bedroom, the door ajar, where she saw a woman reclining on a bed, reading. Abigail Folger, 25, the heiress to a coffee fortune. She'd been staying at the house with Frykowski, her boyfriend, since April. Now she glanced up from her book, smiled and waved at Atkins, who responded in kind and continued down the hall. She peered into a second bedroom where a man sat on the edge of the bed, talking to a pregnant woman who lay there in lingerie. The man, Jay Sebring, 35, was a hairstylist. His shop in Beverly Hills attracted a wealthy, famous clientele. He'd been the first one to cut hair in a private room, as opposed to a barbershop. He'd served in the Navy during the Korean War, an intensely secretive man. He was rumored to allow only 5 people to keep his phone number. On the bed with him was his ex-girlfriend, Sharon Tate, then 26 and 8 months pregnant with her first child. She'd recently filmed her biggest role to date, The 13 Chairs, and her manager had promised her she'd be a star someday. Born in Dallas, Tate was the daughter of an Army officer, and she grew up in cities scattered across the globe. Her beauty was such that she'd apparently stopped traffic, literally, on her first visit to New York. She'd been a homecoming queen and a prom queen. Even at 6 months old, she won a Miss Tiny Tot contest in Texas. A film career, she hoped, would get her noticed for something beyond her good looks. There on CeeLo Drive, at the home she called the Love House, Tate was optimistic about the future. She believed her child would strengthen her marriage to Polanski, who sometimes demeaned her. Having reported back to Watson, Susan Atkins retied Frykowski's hands with a piece of nylon rope. She went to bring the others into the living room, returning with Folger at knife point, and then with Sebring and Tate. "Come with me," she told them. "Don't say a word or you're dead." In their shock and confusion, they offered the intruders money and whatever they wanted, begging them not to hurt anyone. Watson ordered the 3 who'd come from the bedroom to lie face down on their stomachs in front of the fireplace. Tate began to cry. Watson told her to shut up. Taking a long rope, he tied Sebring's hands behind his back and ran a length around his neck. He looped the rope around Tate's neck and then Folger's, throwing the final length over a beam in the ceiling. Sebring struggled to his feet and protested. Couldn't this man see that Tate was pregnant? He tried to move Tate towards Tate, and Watson shot him, puncturing a lung. Sebring crumpled onto the zebra-skin rug by the fireplace. Since they were all tied together, his collapse forced the screaming Tate and Folger to stand on their toes to keep from being strangled. Watson dropped to his knees and began to stab the hairstylist incessantly. Standing up again, he kicked Sebring in the head and then told Krenwinkel to turn off all the lights. Tate asked, "What are you going to do with us?" "You're all going to die," Watson said. Frykowski had managed to free his hands. He lurched towards Atkins, attempting to disarm her, but she forced her knife into his legs, stabbing him constantly as they rolled across the living room floor. a tangle of limbs glinting with steel. Wow. That's an upgrade. It's so high though. Do you have it all the way up? All right.
It's so big though.
It's real tall. Them couches need to be backed up. It's like a 70 inch TV, 75. Anyway, up now. It's like way on a pedestal. All right. He pulled her long hair. His blood was spraying everywhere, and he'd been stabbed more than half a dozen times. But Frykowski staggered to his feet. Atkins had lost her knife, so she made a run for the front door, and with Atkins still pummeling him, I thought Atkins made it. Atkins had not lost her knife, so he made a run for the front door. With Atkins still pummeling him, he got as far as the lawn. Watson halted him with 2 bullets and then tackled him to the ground, pounding the butt of his gun against the back of his head again and again, with such force that the right grip shattered and Frykowski's skull cracked. Ugh. So inside, Tate was sobbing. Then Folger, who'd lifted the noose from her neck, ran down the hall and out of the house through a side door. She was halfway across the front lawn, her nightgown flowing behind her like an apparition, when Krenwinkel caught up to her and brought her knife down, stabbing her 28 times. Watson joined in, and Folger went limp, saying, "I give up. I'm already dead. Take me." That's a White Zombie intro or sample. So drenched in blood and their own sweat, the 2 killers rose to see Frykowski yet again on his feet, stumbling towards them. Soon they were stabbing him with the same mechanical precision, forcing steel through flesh, bone, and cartilage. The coroner tallied 51 stab wounds on the whole, plus 13 blows to the head and 2 bullet wounds. Dang, that guy. Atkins had remained in the house with Tate, who was whimpering, sitting on the floor, still in only lingerie, and still bound by the neck to the dead body of her former lover, Sebring. She was the only one still alive, and she was due to give birth to the child, a boy, in 2 weeks. Watson came back inside and ordered Atkins to kill her. Tate begged her to spare her life, to spare her unborn child. "I want to have my baby," she said. "Woman, I have no mercy for you," Atkins responded, locking her arm around Tate's neck from behind. "You're going to die, and I don't feel anything about it." She stabbed her in the stomach, Watson joining in. The pair stabbed her 16 times until she cried out for her mother and died. Atkins dipped her fingers into one of Tate's wounds, and tasted her blood. It was warm and sticky and nice, she recalled later. To taste death and yet give life, she said. Wow, what a trick. She soaked a towel in Tate's blood and brought it to the front door, where, following Watson's instructions to write something that would shock the world, she scrawled the word pig. Their work was done. Here, let me just, there it is. There it is, and that's Roman Polanski. So, pig, where was it? There it is. When Watson, Atkins, and Krenwinkel and Kasabian returned to the Spawn Ranch early that morning, they went to their beds and slept soundly. "I was gone," Atkins later recalled. "It was like I was dead. I could not think about anything. It was almost as if I passed out, blacked out. My head was blank. There was nothing in me. It was like I had given it all." At 10,050 CeeLo Drive was a scene of such callous, barbarous devastation that it shook something loose in the national psyche. August 8th, 1969, and August 9th, 1969, suddenly seemed to describe different realities. Media accounts were quick to infer something more sordid than ordinary homicide, something occult. One paper called the murders a blood orgy. Others reported ritualistic slayings and overtones of a weird religious rite. The facts were unavailable or misreported. Maybe drugs were involved. Maybe they weren't. Maybe Sebring had been wearing the black hood of a Satanist. Maybe he hadn't. The big picture was one of supernatural ruin. An officer at the scene said the bodies looked like mannequins dipped in red paint. Another said, "It's like a battlefield up there." Pools of blood had soaked into the carpets, according to Time magazine. Stray bullets were lodged in the ceiling. In Roman Polanski, whose films were errantly, even proudly occultist, the public found someone onto whom it could project its fatalism. A popular press account said that mere minutes before he learned of the murders, Polanski, at a party in London, had been discussing a friend's death. "Eeny, meeny, miny, mo," he said, "who will be the next to go?" With that, the phone rang, and he was summoned to hear that his wife and friends had been brutally murdered. It wasn't over. The next night at the Spawn Ranch, the same group convened, with 3 additions. There was the 18-year-old Stephen Clem Grogan, a musician and high school dropout, and the 19-year-old Leslie Lulu Van Houten. That's who White Zombie sampled. I remember her saying, "I'm already dead. I'm already dead." Anyway, a former homecoming princess from the suburbs of Los Angeles who played the sousaphone in junior high. And there was Charles Manson, their leader. The 7 of them piled into the beat-up Ford on a search for more victims. After nearly 3 hours of restive driving through Los Angeles and its environs, Manson finally settled on a home in Los Feliz at 3301 Waverly Drive, next door to a house he'd once stayed in. With no idea of who lived there, he broke into the house by himself, armed with a pistol and a knife. Others maintain that he brought Tex with him. In any case, he spotted Leno LaBianca, 44, a grocery store owner, asleep on the couch, a newspaper over his face. Leno's wife, Rosemary, 38, was in the bedroom. Rosemary was paranoid that people had been breaking in and moving their furniture around lately, and like the whole city, she was spooked by the Tate murders the previous night. Even so, Manson was apparently able to walk right in through an unlocked side door, and he tied up the couple by himself. Then he rejoined his acolytes in the bottom of the long driveway where they were waiting in the car. Manson chose Watson and Krenwinkel again as his executioners. This time he added Van Houten to the mix. She'd never so much as struck another person before that night. He told the 3 of them to go inside and kill everyone. They only had buck knives. They burst into the house, separated the couple, and stabbed Leno 26 times. They cut the word war into his stomach and impaled a carving fork beside it, its handle jutting out of his belly. They left a steak knife protruding from his throat. Rosemary suffered 41 stab wounds, many inflicted after she'd died. Before they left, the killers scrawled, "Helter Skelter" in blood. Healter, and it has brackets with the word sick. I wonder if they are saying it's a typo, but it's a quote, so they have to print it as such. Ooh, I just popped my back. So the killers scrawled Helter Skelter in blood on the refrigerator, misspelling the Beatles song Helter Skelter, which is Helter. On the walls, they smeared Rise and Death to Pigs in Leno's blood. Almost dead inside, the bloodshed, in its primitive defiance, a pregnant star slaughtered. A man perforated with kitchen utensils confirmed a sense of rupture in America. The decade's subversive spirit had come on with too much fervor. Some reckoning was bound to come, or so it seemed in retrospect. The latent violence couldn't contain itself forever. The nation was immured in these events, in the motive, the manhunt, and then in 1970, the sensational 9.5-month-long trial. But Manson and his cohorts weren't brought to justice for nearly 4 months. With the suspects known and at large, rumors proliferated and the tension reached a fever pitch. For a while, the police maintained that the two sets of murders were unrelated, the LaBianca victims of a copycat attack. Even Truman Capote, whose In Cold Blood was only a few years old, I read that too when I was a wee child, fell into the speculative fervor, appearing on The Tonight Show to provide a fantasy explanation of the murders. He blamed them on one person with the motive of a fit of rage and a heaping portion of paranoia. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, two separate teams of LAPD detectives, one assigned to Tate, the other to LaBianca, failed to share information, believing their crimes unconnected. As they lost valuable time pursuing false leads, doubt and ridicule followed them into the press. For almost 4 months, the police would say that they had no real idea who had committed some of the most appalling murders in the history of the country. Talk about the murders long enough, and inevitably someone will bring up Joan Didion's famous remarks from the White Album. Joan Didion, love you. Night. What are you doing? I'm going to bed. Good night. What are you giving me R's for? You're just throwing up gang signs, bruh. Love you. All right. He was like this. I'm like, what's that? Oh, no, he was like this. But I guess this is half a heart. I don't like doing it that way. I'm old school. I'd rather a mere gray. All right. Joan Didion's famous remark from the White Album, the 60s ended abruptly on August 9th, 1969. The tension broke that day. The paranoia was fulfilled. There's a germ of truth in that. But the process wasn't so abrupt. It began that day, but it wasn't over really until December 1st of 1969, when the police announced the crimes had been solved and the nation got its first glimpse of the killers. Here was the final fulfillment of paranoia, the last gasp of 60s idealism. At LAPD headquarters, the chief of police, Edward M. Davis, stepped up to an array of 15 microphones and announced to a stunned crowd of 200 reporters that the case was solved. Warrants were out for Charles Watson, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Linda Kasabian. More people would be named pending grand jury indictments. Davis added, to everyone's astonishment, that the Tate and LaBianca murders were connected. The suspects may have been responsible for a series of other unsolved homicides too. He didn't name Manson or Susan Atkins that day because they were already in custody. In mid-October, Manson, with a welter of his followers, had been apprehended in auto theft charges at the Baker Ranch, a hideaway in forbidding Death Valley. Its seclusion surpassed even that of the Spahn Ranch. Atkins had been charged with another unrelated murder, that of Gary Hinman, an old friend of Manson, and was being held at the Sybil Brand Institute, a jail for women in Los Angeles County, where she bragged to cellmates about her complicity in the Tate murders. Those offhand remarks broke the case open for the LAPD, who began to connect the dots they'd been staring at for nearly 4 months. Journalists dug into the story. Images and mugshots of Manson and the family were emblazoned on front pages and TV screens around the world. The cognitive dissonance was intense. These weren't the faces of hardened criminals or escaped lunatics. They were hippies, stereotypical flower children, in the blue of wide-eyed youth, the men unshaven and long-haired, wearing beads and buckskin jackets, The women in blue jeans and tie-dyed tops, no bras, their hair tangled and unwashed. They talked like hippies too, spouting an ethos of free love, eschewing monogamy and marriage in favor of sexual experimentation. They lived in roving communes, caravanning along the Golden Coast in Technicolor bright buses and clunkers, cobbled together from spare parts. They believed the hallucinogens strengthened the spirit and expanded the mind. They gave birth naturally and raised their children together in rustic simplicity. In other ways, though, their philosophy was Gnostic, verging on theological. Time did not exist, they proclaimed. There was no good, no bad, and no death. All human beings were God and the devil at the same time, and part of one another. In fact, everything in the universe was unified, one with itself. The family's moral code, insofar as it existed at all, was riven with contradictions. While it was wrong to kill animals, even the snakes and spiders in their bunkhouses had to be carefully spared. It was fine to kill people, because a human life was inherently valueless. To kill someone was tantamount to breaking off a minute piece of some cosmic cookie, as Tex Watson later put it. If anything, death was something to be embraced because it exposed your soul to the oneness of the universe. Where had these beliefs come from? The murderers had been raised and educated in solid, conventional American communities, but no one wanted to claim them. The family, with its starry-eyed communalism, sexual frankness, and veneration of LSD, offered a screen onto which anyone could project his insecurities about the era's politics and pressures. The promise of the hippie movement had been in its willingness to forego cherished institutions in favor of the new and untested. After the Tate murders, it seemed that hippies and freaks were more than a risible sideshow. They could really undermine the status quo. Their promiscuity had always earned a lot of finger-wagging from concerned moralists, while others had looked on with thinly veiled envy. Parents worried their kids would drop out, become hippies, and never get decent jobs. Everywhere, kids were hitchhiking. The consensus from the straight world was that hippies were mostly harmless, but you don't want to be one. While there had been isolated incidents of violence attributed to hippies, none of it was as horrific, premeditated, and systematic as the murders committed by Manson's family. And so much about the crimes was mired in uncertainty. Doesn't that seem weird? So much about the crimes was, wouldn't it be were, mired in uncertainty, from the motive to the body count. By some estimates, over that 4-month period in 1969, as many as 33 people may have been killed simply because one man ordered it. This was something altogether different. On December 12th, with the nation still reeling from the indictments, a piece in Time magazine drew spacious parallels between hippies and violence. In the movement's invitation to freedom, the magazine warned, criminals and psychotics blossomed as easily as innocents and pacifists did. But how, Time asked, could children who had dropped out for the sake of kindness and caring, love and beauty, be enjoined to kill? Dr. Louis Yablonsky, a sociologist who'd written the book called The Hippie Trip, argued that many hippies were lonely, alienated people. Even when they act as if they love, they can be totally devoid of true compassion. That is the reason why they can kill so matter-of-factly. Many hippies are socially almost dead inside. Some require massive emotions to feel anything at all. They need bizarre, intensive acts to feel alive. Sexual acts, acts of violence, nudity, every kind of Dionysian thrill. The Mechanical Boy. And this Charles Mills Manson, Miles, M-I-L-L-E-S, I don't remember ever hearing somebody say his last name, whose face was suddenly everywhere. Was he not the epitome of the Dionysian thrill seeker, a 35-year-old ex-con, roughly half his life whiled away in federal institutions, had ensnared the lives and minds of his followers. Many young women, numbering variously between 2 to 3 dozen, the majority of the family members had been under Manson's influence for less than 2 years, some not even close to that. Yet all of them... Oops, my battery is dying. Let me plug it in before I lose you. Am I still on? Are you guys still there? Somebody say something so I know I didn't freeze. Love you. Thank you for doing that. Thank you. All right, Mary. Thank you for that. So, yet all of them would do anything Manson asked without question, including slaughtering complete strangers. He had cultivated extreme compliance. Manson was an unlikely candidate for a charismatic leader born in Cincinnati, Ohio, to a 16-year-old mother and a father he never met. He'd known little but privation and suffering. Few would be naturally inclined to look up to him, and in the most literal sense, not many could. He was only 5'6". Manson spent his earliest years in neglect. When he was still an infant, his mother would leave him to go on benders with her brother, during one of which the pair decided to rob a guy who looked wealthy. Within hours, they'd been arrested, and Manson's mother was imprisoned for several years. He was 8 when she was released, and they spent the next months with a succession of unreliable men in seamy locales. His mom racking up another arrest for grand larceny. Eventually, she pursued a traveling salesman in Indianapolis, marrying him in 1943, and trying to cut back on her drinking. Manson, not yet 9, was already a truant, known to steal from local shops. His mother looked for a foster home for him. Instead, he was made ward of the state and sent to the Gibalt School for Boys. Gibalt, or Gibalt, a Catholic-run school for delinquents in Terre Haute, Indiana. He ran away. His mother took him back. The separation must have weighed on him, at least to go by his acolyte Watson, who later wrote that Manson had a special hatred for women as mothers. This probably had something to do with his feelings about his own mother, though he never talked about her. The closest he came to breaking his silence was in some of his song lyrics. I am a mechanical boy. I am my mother's boy. The mechanical boy made short work of the Gibalt School. 10 months in, he ran away again, turning to burglary to keep himself afloat. His crimes soon landed him in a correctional facility in Omaha, Nebraska. He ran away from there too and started breaking into grocery stores. At age 13, Manson was sent to Indiana boys' school, a tougher institution where he claimed the other boys raped him. He learned to feign lunacy. I wonder, I've said a lot of really YouTube flaggable words. I hope this doesn't get pulled. If so, I will re-record it. He learned to feign lunacy to keep them at bay, and he kept running away 18 times in 3 years. In February of 1951, when he was 16, Manson broke out again, this time with a pair of other boys. They drove a stolen car across state lines, a federal offense. When a roadblock in Utah brought their escapade to an end, Manson was sent to National Training School for Boys in Washington, D.C. Thus began a long stint in the federal reformatory system. From there, Manson went to the National Bridge Honor Camp, where he was caught raping a boy at knife point, to a federal reformatory in Virginia, where he racked up similar offenses, and to a reformatory in Ohio, where a run of good behavior earned him an early release in 1954, though caseworkers had taken frequent note of his antisocial behavior and psychic trauma. In less than a year's time, he had a wife and a baby on the way. He took on various service jobs, but he couldn't give up stealing cars, several of which he drove, again, across state lines. Those crimes, plus his failure to attend a hearing related to one of them, netted him a 3-year sentence to Terminal Island, a federal prison in San Pedro, California, which I have spent a lot of time in San Pedro. By the time he got out in 1958, his wife had filed for divorce. San Pedro, my mom would call it, my grandmother, the white folks, you know. So by the time he got out in 1958, his wife had filed for divorce and he turned to pimping to make a living. The following May, he was arrested yet again, this time for forging a government check for $37.50. I want to say too, I've been trying to coach my mom most of my life to say jalapeno instead of jalapeno. And it took me a while, but I finally got her saying tortilla chip. That must have happened in the 90s, though. I think that was the first one that she acquiesced to saying properly. So my mom is not, she's a nice lady. So we'll just leave it at that. So this got him another 10-year sentence. But the judge, moved by the plea of a woman who said she was in love with him and wanted to marry him, suspended the sentence right away, letting him go free. Manson kept pimping, stealing cars, and scheming people out of their money. The FBI was surveilling him, hoping to bust him for violating the Mann Act, which forbade the transportation of prostitutes across state lines. Oh, there it is. I need to... I wonder if that's a dishwasher. I heard it last night. It sounded like somebody was watching TV upstairs. Hello, Russia. Welcome. Good timing. Okay, the Mann Act, which forbade the transportation of prostitutes across state lines. They were never able to bring the charge, but when Manson disappeared to Mexico with another prostitute, he was found in violation of his probation, and the 10-year sentence he'd received earlier was brought into effect. The same judge who'd granted him probation now decreed, if there ever was a man who demonstrated himself completely unfit for probation, he is it. Stuck in prison for the long haul, Manson took up the guitar and dabbled in Scientology. The staff noted his gift for charismatic storytelling and his enduring personality problems. He made no secret of his musical aspirations. From behind bars, he observed with great interest and envy the meteoric rise of the Beatles. When he was released at age 32, he spent more than half of his life in the care of the estate. He preferred life in prison, he said, so much so that he asked if he could simply remain inside. He has no plans for release, one report said, as he says he has nowhere to go. Bloodthirsty robots. Reading early press accounts of Manson and the family, I found it hard to separate hyperbole from veracity. Manson was often made out as an artful seeker, an evil Pied Piper, as one paper put it, with reserves of obscure power. About a week after the family's arrests, a photograph of a wild-eyed Charlie Manson looking for all the world like a modern-day Rasputin, I think we all know that picture, appeared on the cover of Life magazine. Oh yeah. Inside the issue, the Manson women, many of them barely teenagers, posed with babies slung over their slender shoulders. They spoke of their love and undying support for Charlie, whom they deemed the second coming of Christ and Satan in one. The media had already started to label the family a nomadic band of hippies and a pseudo-religious cult. The New York Times, striking a dramatic note, claimed they lived a life of indolence, free sex, midnight motorcycle races, and blind obedience to a mysterious guru inflamed with his power to control their minds and bodies. The underground press, though, had a swell of sympathy for Manson. People thought he was innocent, that his status as a left-leaning communard had been overblown. Tuesday's Child, an LA counterculture paper geared towards occultists, named Manson their Man of the Year. Some don't even care if he was behind the murders. Bernadine Dorn of the Weather Underground put it most outrageously, offing those rich pigs with their own forks and knives and then eating a meal in the same room, far out. The weathermen dig Charles Manson. I watched the first television footage of Manson. Cameras followed as bailiffs led him to a pretrial hearing, shackled, stooped, and glaring. I saw few traces of his fabled charisma, but I understood how his unsocialized air of pseudo-mysticism and jailhouse aggression seemed authentic. Manson brought a rollicking exhibition of controlled insanity whenever he appeared before the bench. He quarreled with the judge, arguing that he should be allowed to represent himself. The girls, for their part, mimicked their leader's behavior, publicly battling the judge and their court-appointed defense attorneys at every opportunity, and refusing to obey even the most fundamental rules of courtroom decorum. That Manson had been apprehended in Death Valley as abyssal a place at any... Stop. That Manson had been apprehended in Death Valley. Are you crying? B. What's wrong? What's wrong, Missy? Aw, what's wrong? Aw, were you crying? Would you get lost? Were you sad? Were you a sad girl? Don't. You're a good girl. You're a good girl. Don't cook you out of the chat. Go lay down. It's a good girl. Yes, you are. Aw, she's just laying her head. That's sweet. She's a snuggler. All right. Abyssal. That word is throwing me off. It made everything else jumble together. So that Manson had been apprehended in Death Valley as abyssal a place as any in the United States made him all the more transfixing. Reporters played up the Rasputin comparison, emphasizing his desert wanderer sorcery. He was a bearded, demonic Mahdi, wrote one journalist, who led a mystical, semi-religious hippie drug and murder cult. Another described him as a bushy-haired, wild-bearded little man with piercing brown eyes. With the family, a hippie-type roving band. Manson's malevolence was seemingly inexplicable. Even in the doodles that he left behind on a courtroom legal pad, psychiatrists saw a psyche torn asunder by powerful thrusts of aggression, guilt, and hostility. Beneath the spectacle, I could glimpse the public's truer, more profound interest in the case, the same puzzle that could consume me. How and why had these people devolved into criminals? And more pointedly, could it happen to an average American child? Could anyone go too far? The trial started July of 1970. The jury was sequestered at the Ambassador Hotel, where 2 years earlier, Bobby Kennedy had been assassinated. The Superior Courthouse in downtown Los Angeles became the center of media circus, unlike any the nation had ever seen. The 6 defendants, Charles Manson, Patricia Krenwinkel, Susan Atkins, Leslie Van Houten, Steve Grogan, and Linda Kasabian, received the kind of scrutiny known only to the most famous celebrities in the world. Tex was tied separately from the other family members. He was tried separately. He had fled to Texas and had been extradited to California. Vincent Bugliosi became the public face of the state, the Manson's de facto foil. Though you'd never know it to look at them, the two were the same age. Manson was actually Bugliosi's senior by 3 months. Both were 35 when the trial began, but Bugliosi, with his 3-piece suits and his receding hairline, was the very picture of the straight world, with its authority and moral gravity. Sometimes he looked old enough to be Manson's dad. In Helter Skelter, Bugliosi claims an aversion to the stereotyped image of the prosecutor as a right-winged, law and order type, intent on winning convictions at any cost. But that's exactly how he came across. In file photographs, he often haloed in microphones, his solemn pronouncements helping the world make sense of the senseless. Journalists lauded his even-toned arguments. With his opening statement, Bugliosi, no less colorful a character than Manson, made what was already a sensational case even more so. The motive he presented for the murder was spellbindingly bizarre. In Bugliosi's telling, it crossed racism with apocalyptic biblical rhetoric, all of it set to a melody by the Beatles, the English musical recording group, as he primely referred to them. Manson was an avid follower of the Beatles and believed they were speaking to him through the lyrics of their song, which is interesting and telling because speaking in reverse, I think, was also mentioned in Mind War. And I want to bring up The Winged Beetle because it ties the Beatles to Aleister Crowley, and it's quite an interesting movie. I've only found it on YouTube. So Manson was an avid follower of the Beatles and believed that they were speaking to him through the lyrics of their songs. Helter Skelter, the title of one of the Beatles' songs, meant the black man rising up against the white establishment and murdering the entire white race. That is, with the exception of Manson and his chosen followers, who intended to escape from Helter Skelter by going to the desert and living in the bottomless pit, a place Manson derived from Revolution 9. Nothing like this had ever been heard in a courtroom. People kill one another for all kinds of reasons, but they're usually personal, not metaphysical. Seldom had threads like these, racism, rock music, the end times, been woven together in a single lethal philosophy. When Paul Watkins, a former family member, took the stand to elaborate on Helter Skelter, the details were even more jarring. Watkins spoke of a big underground city, secreted away in a hole wide enough that you could drive a speedboat across it. From the Book of Revelations, the family knew the city would have no sun and no moon and a tree that bears 12 different kinds of fruit. Oh my goodness. My bad. My dyslexia is happening. All right. Subsisting on that fruit in their subterranean Elysium, the family would multiply into 144,000 people. As insane and illogical as it sounded, Bugliosi explained, Manson's followers subscribed to his prophecy of Armageddon as if it had been delivered from the Holy Mount. They were willing to kill for him to make it a reality. But none of this explained why Manson had chosen the Tate LaBianca homes as his targets. Manson had known the former tenants of the Tate house, Terry Melcher. That's the Murphy Brown reference. What's her name again? Murphy Brown. A record producer and the son of Doris Day. Melcher had flirted with the idea of recording Manson, who had dreams of rock stardom, but he decided against it. Sometime in the spring before the murders, Manson had gone looking for Melcher at the house, hoping to change his mind, but a friend of the new tenants told him that Melcher had moved out. Manson didn't like the guy's brusque attitude. Consequently, the house on CeeLo Drive came to represent the establishment that had rejected him. When he ordered the killings, he wanted to instill fear in Terry Melcher. Susan Atkins had said, sending a clear signal to the stars and executives who had snubbed him. As for the LaBianca house, Manson had once stayed in the place next door. That house was no longer occupied, but it was no matter. The neighbors, Manson decided, would suffice as targets, because they too, no matter who they were, symbolized the establishment he sought to overthrow with Helter Skelter. I remember reading it too and not thinking that it didn't seem, because I really liked the Beatles and I thought, that's not what they meant. I just remember as a kid thinking, like, I'm not buying it. And I thought the Beatles references didn't make sense. So the trial was the longest and most expensive in U.S. history at the time. It wasn't as straightforward as it might seem, because Manson himself hadn't actually murdered anyone. He hadn't set foot in the Tate home at all, and though he'd entered the LaBianca home, he left before his followers killed the couple. That meant Manson could be convicted of first-degree murder only through a charge of conspiracy. According to the legal principle of vicarious liability, any conspirator was also guilty of the crimes committed by his co-conspirators. In other words, if the prosecution could prove that Manson had ordered the killings, he would be guilty of murder, even having not laid a finger on any of the victims. Bugliosi had to show that Manson had a unique ability to control his followers' thoughts and actions, that they would do whatever he asked, even kill complete strangers. That was a hard swallow. Just means I needed it. Could you hear it? Anyway. Strangers. Yes, okay, it would have been a complicated case, even had things proceeded smoothly. But the family did all they could to throw sand in the gears. On the very first day of the trial, Manson showed up at the courthouse with an X carved into his forehead. The wound so fresh it was still bleeding. The next day, Atkins, Krenwinkel, and Van Houten, arrived with their own bloody X's. The women skipped down the courtroom hallway, 3 abreast, holding hands, singing nursery rhymes that Manson had written. They laughed at the photographers who jostled to get their pictures. During the trial, if Manson took umbrage at something, they took umbrage, too, mimicking his profanity, his expressions, his outbursts. The judge, Charles Older, would often threaten to remove Manson. On one occasion, Manson returned the reproach, "I will have you removed if you don't stop. I have a little system of my own. Do you think I'm kidding?" Grabbing a sharp pencil, he sprang over the defense table, flinging himself towards Older. A bailiff intervened and tackled him, and the girls jumped to their feet too, chanting unintelligible verses in Latin. As he was dragged from the courtroom, Manson remained defiant, shouting, "In the name of Christian justice, someone should cut your head off." It was a glimpse of the raw pugilism that ran beneath Manson's philosopher guru facade. The judge began to carry a .38 revolver under his robes. Things were no more orderly outside the courtroom, where at the corner of Temple and Grand, members of the family gathered each morning to hold sidewalk vigils. Barefoot and belligerent, they sat in wide circles, singing songs in praise of their leader. The women suckled newborns, the men laughed and ran their fingers through their long, unwashed hair. All had followed Manson's lead and cut X's into their foreheads, distributing typewritten statements explaining that self-mutilation symbolized their Xing themselves out of society. Bugliosi called the defendants bloodthirsty robots, a grandiloquent phrase. Oh no, that's not what it says at all. A grandiloquent phrase, but an apt one. It captured the unsettling duality of the killers, at once animal and artificial, divorced from emotion and yet capable of executing the most intimate, visceral form of murder imaginable. Tex Watson would later hymn the detached, automated ecstasy of stabbing. Over and over, again and again, my arm like a machine, at one with the blade. Susan Atkins told a cellmate that plunging the knife into Tate's pregnant belly was like a sexual release, especially when you see the blood spurting out. It's better than a climax. And behind them was Manson, who lived for sex even as he described himself as the mechanical boy. Oh, we're an hour and a half deep. I'll stop there. Should I stop there? Let me see. Hour and a half. Oh, I'll finish this chapter if y'all will stick with me. After 7 grueling months, the first phase of the new trial drew to a close, and the jury, after 10 days of deliberation, arrived at unanimous guilty verdicts. Now, in the second phase, the prosecution had to present an argument for putting the defendants to death. Their case and the defense's counter-arguments led to some of the most unnerving testimony yet, including a kind of symposium on LSD, not as a recreational drug, but as an agent of mind control. This death penalty phase of the trial entertained some of the same questions that engrossed and vexed me for the next 2 decades. Had Manson really brainwashed people? If so, how? And if one person was truly under the psychological control of another, then who is responsible for that person's actions? For the first time, the 3 convicted women, Atkins, Krenwinkel, and Van Houten, took the witness stand. One by one, they explained their roles in the murder, absolving Manson of any complicity and proclaiming their utter lack of remorse. The families of the victims looked on in stunned silence as the women described their loved ones' final moments in clinical detail. To kill someone, the women explained, was an act of love. It freed that person from the confines of their physical being. Almost unblinkingly, Susan Atkins recalled how Tex Watson had told her to murder Tate. He looked at her and he said, "Kill her," and I killed her. I just stabbed her and she fell, and I stabbed her again. I don't know how many times I stabbed her. Did she feel animosity towards Tate or others? She shrugged. I didn't know any of them. How could I have felt any emotion without knowing them? She knew that what she was doing was right, she added, because it felt good. Patricia Krenwinkel said she'd felt nothing when she stabbed Abigail Folger 28 times. What is there to describe? It was just there, and it's like it was right. Why should she kill a woman she didn't even know? Well, it's hard to explain. It was just a thought, and the thought came to be. Sorry is only a 5-letter word, Leslie Van Houten told the courtroom. It can't bring back anything. She helped stab Rosemary LaBianca 41 times. What can I feel? Van Houten said. It has happened, and she's gone. Unrepentant as the women were, Bugliosi had his work cut out for him when it came to securing the death penalty. His reasoning relied on a seeming contradiction. He'd argued during the first phase of the trial that the women were brainwashed zombies, totally in Manson's thrall. Now he had to prove the opposite, that they were as complicit as Manson was, although they were automatons, Bugliosi said, slavishly obedient to Manson's every command. The women still had, deep down inside themselves, such bloodlust that they deserved the death penalty. The defense argued that women were merely pawns. Manson had used an almost technologically precise combination of drugs, hypnotism, and coercion to transform those formerly nonviolent people into frenzied psychopathic killers. At that point, scientists in the United States had been studying LSD for only a little more than a decade. It was far from a known quantity. Manson, the defense said, had used the drug to ply his impressionable followers, accessing their innermost chambers of their mind and molding them to his designs. Former members of the family have often recounted Manson's systematic brainwashing methods, beginning with the seduction of new recruits by bombarding them with love, sex, and drugs. On the witness stand, Paul Watkins outlined the nearly weekly orgies that Manson orchestrated at Spawn Ranch. The leader would hand out drugs, personally deciding everyone's dosage, and then, as Bugliosi writes in Helter Skelter, Charlie might dance around, everyone else following like a train. As he'd take off his clothes, all the rest would take off their clothes. Charlie would direct the orgy, arranging bodies, combinations, positions. He'd set it all up in a beautiful way, like he was creating a masterpiece in sculpture, Watkins said. But instead of clay, he was using warm bodies. If any of those bodies had hang-ups or inhibitions, Manson would eliminate them. He'd force someone to do whatever he or she most resisted doing. One 13-year-old girl's initiation into the family consisted of her being sodomized by Manson while the others watched, Bugliosi wrote. Manson also went down on a young boy to show the others he had rid himself of all inhibitions. Tex Watson, in his 1978 memoir, Will You Die for Me?, tells a similar story. There was a room in the back of the ranch house totally lined with mattresses, he wrote, essentially set aside for sex. As we had any inhibitions, we still weren't dead. We were still playing back what our parents had programmed into us. Having made them feel freed and wanted, Manson would isolate his followers from the world beyond the ranch, giving them daily tasks to support the commune and forbidding them from communicating with their families or friends. He was a world without newspapers, clocks, or calendars. Manson chose new names for his initiates. In order for me to be completely free of my mind, I had to be able to completely forget the past. Susan Atkins testified, "The easiest way to do this is to have to change identity." Their induction was complete after they participated in lengthy LSD sessions, often stretching over consecutive days with no breaks, during which Manson only pretended to take the drug, or took a much smaller dose. Clear-headed, he manipulated their minds with elaborate word games and sensory techniques he developed in the 2 years since his release from prison. With only negligible downtime between acid trips, detachment was all the easier. Every experience led the family to drift further from reality until, eventually, even basic contradictions seemed tenable. Death was the same as life. Good was no different from bad, and God was inseparable from Satan. Paul Watkins believed that Manson wanted to use LSD to instill his philosophies, exploit weakness and fears, and extract promises and agreements from his followers. And it worked. Watkins recalled an instance in which Manson told Susan, where is it? I got all irritated. I rolled my eyes at myself. Watkins recalled an instance in which Manson told Susan Atkins, "I'd like half a coconut, even if you have to go to Rio de Janeiro to get it." Atkins got right up and was on her way out the door when Charlie said, "Never mind." Manson excelled, Watson said, at locating deep-seated hang-ups. Hello, my kitty. Mm-hmm. He took up residence in people's heads, living with them with no point of reference, nothing to relate back to, no right, no wrong, no roots. They lived in a new reality summoned by LSD, which left them melt-twisted and free of pretension in timeless spirals of movement. Ironically, as followers became more and more robotic, Manson taught them that people in the straight world were like computers. The family's Brooks Poston wrote, Their worldviews were simply a matter of society's programming, and any program could be expunged. On the stand, hey, don't scratch stuff. Oh, you're just, all right. I thought he was, anyway. Their worldviews were simply a matter of society's programming, and any program could be expunged. On the stand, Susan Atkins described Sharon Tate as an IBM machine. Words came out of her mouth, but they didn't make any sense to me. For a family novitate, it's a novice, right? But I've never heard it stated such. I mean, I've read this before, but novitiate? The goal was to burn yourself out, to take so much LSD and listen to so much of Charlie's music that you returned to purity and nothingness, resembling a new birth, Tex Watson wrote. This was called going dead in the head. Oh my, I'm sorry. Dead in the head. And it let you incorporate into the collective, sharing one common brain. Bugliosi had to use a little prosecutorial hocus pocus to tell stories like these. He argued that the Manson women had been psychologically compromised, but he didn't assert that Manson had actually created his killers. Despite Manson's talk about reprogramming, there had been no template for one person ever having done such a thing to another. Instead, Bugliosi purported that Manson's followers must have had some pre-existing homicidal impulse buried in their subconscious. Manson had learned to recognize and exploit that impulse, but even so, each woman was responsible for her actions. Then, as now, this position fascinated and perplexed me. It posited a form of brainwashing in which the brainwashed were still, to some degree, themselves. When it came time to decide on the death penalty, though, the defense called a series of psychiatric experts who disagreed. Manson had brainwashed his followers, they said, and those followers couldn't be culpable for the murders. LSD had given him a portal to the most labile parts of the subconscious. Labial? L-A-B-I-L-E, not A. It's labile. Right? The scientists explained how acid could break down and reconstruct someone's personality, how a sober guide intended to lead someone peacefully through the many hours of an acid trip could abuse the role, inserting violent ideas and beliefs into their mind. With repetition and reinforcement, these beliefs took root and flourished even when the followers were sober. Throw in coercive techniques like sensory deprivation and hypnosis, both of which Manson embraced, and it was possible to rewrite someone's moral code such that she acknowledged no such thing as right or wrong. Dr. Joel Fort, a research psychiatrist who'd opened the National Front, who'd opened the nation's first LSD treatment center, was one of the defense's witnesses. He believed that Manson had used LSD to produce a new pattern of behavior for the girls, resulting in a totally neutral system which saw death or killing in a completely different way than a normal person sees it, free of social concern, compassion, and moral values. One of the most remarkable exchanges in the trial, Manson's attorney, Irving Kanarek, asked Dr. Fort if a school for crime could exist. People with social rejects and fueled by LSD. Let us say, with your knowledge of LSD, you have a school for crime, and then you take them here and you program them to go out and commit a murder here, there, everywhere. Are you telling us that this can be done? That you can capture the human mind by such a school for crime? Quote, I am indeed telling you that, Fort said, and he'd never seen anything like it. He compared it to a government's ability, through the nebulous powers of patriotism, to condition soldiers to kill on its behalf. What no one brought up was how someone like Manson, with little formal education and so much prison time under his belt, had mastered the ability to control people this way. Whether you thought it was full-on brainwashing or merely intense coercion, the fact remained. He'd done it. No one else had. This remains the most enduring mystery of the case. It's the one that still keeps me up at night, and while all this back and forth about LSD is provocative, it feels like an insufficient explanation. In Helter Skelter, Bugliosi grapples with the unfathomable riddle. How did Charles Manson, a barely literate ex-con who spent more than half of his life in federal institutions, turn a group of previously peaceful hippies, among them a small town librarian, a high school football star, and a homecoming princess, into savage, unrepentant killers in less than a year? Bugliosi conceded that he still didn't have the answer. All these factors contributed to Manson's control over others. He writes, but when you add them all up, do they equal murder without remorse? Maybe, but I tend to think there's something more, some missing link that enabled him to so grape and bastardize the minds of his killers. I should have maybe reread the other ones and not this one, because it was talking about the minds of the killers, that they would go against the most ingrained of all commandments, thou shalt not kill, and willingly, even eagerly, murder at his command. It may be something in his charismatic, enigmatic personality, some tangible quality that no one else has yet been able to isolate and identify. It may be something that he learned from others. Whatever it is, I believe Manson has full knowledge of the formula he used, and it worries me that we do not. In the end, Manson and his followers got the death penalty anyway. Bugliosi said that they had, coursing through their veins, the willingness to kill others. For the jury, as for the public, that was a much more comfortable truth. These were an aberration, brainwashing, complete loss of agency. These were difficult to contemplate, let alone accept. When you take LSD enough times, you reach a stage of nothing, Manson had said in court. You reach a stage of no thought. No one wanted to dwell on that ingrained evil, teased out of young women by a mastermind. That was something. And something was better than a stage of nothing. When the jury delivered death sentences to the 4 defendants, Manson, Krenwinkel, Atkins, and Van Houten, Kasabian had become a witness for the prosecution and was granted immunity. The 3 women sprang to their feet. Their heads were freshly shaved, as Manson's was. They had enlarged the X's on their forehead, as Manson had, and they were livid. You have judged yourselves, Patricia Krenwinkel screamed at the jury. Better lock your doors and watch your kids, Susan Atkins warned. Your whole system is a game, Leslie Van Houten shouted. You blind, stupid people, your children will turn against you. Out on the street, Sandy Good, one of Manson's fiercest loyalists, looked into a TV camera and said, Death? That's what you're all gonna get. With that, the family was swept off the national stage and the public could relegate those grisly crimes to the past. 7 people had been brutally murdered, but the nation was confident that we knew how and why, and that the evil people were behind bars. Awesome. I got all the way. All right. We'll start chapter 2 tomorrow. I guess I can keep it here. Yes. June. Eloquent. Are you making fun of me? That's all right. I have dyslexia. I have ADHD. You can't expect perfection, and I think that's okay coming from a space where AI is taking over. And we get to talk about it, you guys. Hi, who's here with me? Who's here right now? Did I go back? I want to stay here. Who was here with me last night? Because I got my bike. I'm so excited. It rides so nice. There's like a training type trail for mountain biking that me and my kids have been going down. They call it the roller coaster. And it feels like that. And my old bike, the one I biffed on, is currently getting tuned up. It's getting a bit of an overhaul because I didn't have brake usage. I understand. I appreciate you, ball striker bandito. Thank you for being here. It's nice to see you. Oh, I wonder if Craig is still here. Anyway. What was I talking about? Oh, my bike. I didn't have brakes. I had the front brake only. Oh, man, and it was grindy, so I need to get a new chain, a new sprocket, and new cables for the brakes. And I may just we were searching for 2 other bikes for my kiddos, and I may just give them mine. My old one is a Raleigh, which is pretty decent. I got it over 10 years ago. I've never gotten a tune-up. I didn't always take very good care of it either, but I mean, it's a good bike, a Raleigh. Now I got a Trek, Merlin 5, and it's gorgeous. I love it. Anybody else bike? What do you like to do? Should we just go? It's kind of late. Some of y'all fell asleep still watching me, huh? Emigre. Emigre. Thank you for that, Michael. Yes. Murphy Brown dated, what's his name? Doris Day's son. What's his name? I guess I can go back and look. What was his name again? The Stage of Nothing. Oh, Melcher, right? Terry Melcher. That's right. Beach Cruiser. Nice. Ball Striker, what's your name? I haven't seen you here before. I mean, I can call you Ball Striker. Excuse me. I don't like to do this. James, good to meet you. You seem to be the only one that's awake. Oh, Weira. You're sending me a taco? Is that a derogatory emoji? Taco v eggplant. Well, thanks for being here with me. I guess, I mean, everybody seems a little bit sleepy whenever I go long. Ooh, 116 minutes, so we're just shy of 2 hours. You were timed out? Ooh, did that just happen? 83,000 seconds, my dude. Yeah. Somebody said being a high school graduate back in those days was like having a college degree. Yeah. Which is worth less and less these days, especially knowing what's being peddled. That was weird but interesting. What, this book? This, I read it before. I did a poll. I wanted to see which book to read next after we read the Tavistock Institute. Or no, after Tavistock was Mind War. And then the Book of Enoch. And then the Devil's Chessboard. This one won, but because I had already read it, I didn't want to read it. And then people kept bugging me about it. So it's a good one. Thomas O'Neill. You can, if you wanted to cheat, even though I think the book is better and they cover more, there's a Netflix documentary series that you can watch if you wanted some spoilers. Or just let me read it to you. We can hang out at night, bedtime story style, where we can talk about it together. If you're into it. Yeah, that's a good movie. That's a pretty good movie. I like Tarantino. But that one, I mean, that was probably the last one I'll watch. We'll see. Because I feel like he's milked all of his cliche, like the feet, the gore, the surprise gore. Although it was satisfying to watch that scene. And Uma Thurman's daughter was in it. I thought that was neat too. Craig, you're back. You're here. We're done. We read through the whole chapter, epilogue in chapter 1. So tomorrow, how many chapters is this? Notes. A lot of notes. There we go. So, we're this. Let me see. Last chapter. I think I saw it. Nope. Epilogue. And I will read that for sure. All right. Come on. 12 chapters. We could get this done quickly if I do 2 hours. Django was good. That was a good one. I just watched Paradise Records the other night. Last night. That was a bummer. I only watched it because Oliver Tree is in it. And his character, his acting was phenomenal. In the last scene he was in, because he dies in it. Thank you. American Eagle. I love it. My kids picked it for me, and I was like, heck yeah, I like it. Oversized. I like sleeves that hang over the fingers. And I love my country, just not my government. Shadowy or, you know, in your face government. What was it? Oh yeah, Paradise Records. So it's Common. Common wrote it. Kevin Smith edited it, and Kevin Smith did like Dogma and Clerks and Jay and Silent Bob. And that guy, I mean, I've seen him do a couple of interviews with people. Like he interviewed some other famous person, just wouldn't let him talk. I think he was talking with, I don't remember. I don't want to say it. But that dude, he is a mile a minute. The dead come beast move ever from the past. The dead come beast move ever from the past. Is that what you meant to type, or is there a typo, or is that what I should look up? Because I will. Yeah, love it. And I feel like we all are at this point. I mean, you see there was, I guess Tucker talked about it, but there was a guy who went and destroyed flock cameras, and he came on to be interviewed with an American shirt and a cowboy hat. And it was like, that's fucking A right. Because it is not just some hoodlum. It is not just some miscreant out there trying to, you know, do hood rat things with his hood rat friends. It was a goddamn blue-blooded American. Look it up, dead come. The dead come, beast move ever from the past. Shoot. Are you going to make me look this up right now? The dead come back. The dead come home. The dead come to stay. The dead come. Beast move. Oh, best movie ever from the past. The Dead Come Home from 1989. I know. I have actually. I have a picture with him. I just didn't post it because I didn't think people would recognize his face. There was another guy in a metal T-shirt or something. Dead Come, not The Dead Come. Let's do that. Oh my God, it sounds a little. Dead Come Alive and animation. It looks like your search was cut short. The Dead Come Talking by Ro Capera. The song Dead Come to Life by Jonathan Thulin. Oh, The Dead Calm, C-A-L-M. No. Dead Calm. It's Winona Ryder, no? Is that not Winona Ryder? That looks like her in the movie. Yes. Is a 1989 Australian horror thriller film directed by Philip Noyce and starring Sam Neill, Nicole Kidman. Oh, is that Nicole Kidman? And Billy Zane. Filmed around the Great Barrier Reef, Dead Calm was the first successful film adaptation of Williams' novel after Orson Welles worked for a number of years to complete his own film based on the title The Deep. Though it ultimately went unreleased and uncompleted, Dead Calm was generally well received, with critics praising Neil, Kidman, and Zane's performances. It's a good movie. Ray Ingram was traumatized after a car crash resulted in the death of her young son. Her older husband, Royal Australian Naval Captain John Ingram, suggests a vacation on their yacht. In the middle of the Pacific Ocean, they encounter a drifting schooner that appears to be taking on water. A distressed man rows a dinghy over to the Saracen. He introduces himself as Huey Werner and tells them the schooner is sinking. The other passengers have died of food poisoning 10 days prior. I mean, the plot, it's a long... That was good, Dead Calm. Oh, you seen it? Orpheus. Cool. I am all about movies. Oh yeah, I was talking about Paradise Records, And the reason I thought about it was because of Tarantino. When you have somebody who finds their niche, and they overwork it, it gets a little tired. And Paradise Records, it seemed to be that they wanted to definitely ring those ideological bells throughout. I don't know. There was like COVID references and a lot of race baiting type stuff, and even the trans stuff came up, and he really wanted to redo Clerks, but in this political climate, I think it was just like the death rattle of that, the 2020s. I mean, we're only in 2026, but I feel like the early 2020s were just a mess, and that's COVID's fault. Maybe we all got a little stir crazy. Anyway, all right, I'm gonna go to bed. I'll see you guys tomorrow. We'll get into chapter 2. Thanks for being here with me. Thanks for the movie recommendation. Don't miss chapter 2. All right.